I had been living with my roommate Sarah for almost a year. We got along well, sharing our daily routines and occasionally grabbing dinner together. It was a comfortable situation, until things took an unexpected turn. Sarah had been dating her boyfriend, Mark, for a few months. They seemed happy, and he often stayed over. I tried to stay out of their way, but one night, everything changed. It was a Friday, and Sarah and I were both home, watching a movie after a long work week. Mark was supposed to come over later, but he texted Sarah saying he'd be late. As the night went on, the conversation between us shifted from light-hearted jokes to deeper topics, about life, relationships, and everything in between. We shared things we hadn't before, and I realized we had more in common than I thought. As the hours passed, the mood grew heavier, with both of us feeling the closeness of the moment. There was a certain tension in the air, and before I knew it, Sarah leaned in a little too close. Our eyes locked, and for a second, everything felt charged. I knew this was wrong. Mark was supposed to be here any minute, and she wasn't just my roommate, she was my friend. But in that fleeting moment, lines blurred. The tension between us finally snapped, and we kissed. It wasn't planned, and it wasn't something either of us talked about beforehand. It just happened. We pulled away almost immediately, realizing what had just occurred. Sarah looked panicked. "This can't happen," she whispered, standing up quickly. "Mark's on his way. This was a mistake." I nodded, feeling guilty and confused. She was right. It was a mistake, but we couldn't undo it, and we both knew it. As if on cue, Mark arrived a few minutes later. Sarah and I avoided eye contact for the rest of the night, the weight of what had happened hanging between us. I wondered how we'd move forward, whether things would ever be the same again. 2 months had passed since that night. Sarah and I hadn't spoken about what had happened, and things had mostly returned to normal, or so it seemed. We both acted as if nothing had changed, but deep down, we both knew there was an unspoken tension lingering in the air. One evening, a heavy storm rolled in. The sky was dark, the rain came down in sheets, and thunder rumbled in the distance. Sarah's boyfriend, Mark, had been planning to stay over, but as the rain worsened, he called Sarah to let her know he couldn't make it. His car had broken down, and with the roads flooding, he decided to crash at a friend's place for the night. Sarah hung up the phone, letting out a small sigh. "Looks like it's just you and me tonight," she said with a half smile. There was something in her voice, an almost imperceptible change in tone that I couldn't quite place. We ordered some takeout and put on a movie to pass the time. The sound of the rain tapping against the windows added an almost hypnotic rhythm to the room. Everything seemed normal, but the atmosphere between us felt heavier than usual. It was as if the storm outside mirrored the tension between us. Halfway through the movie, the power went out. The room was cast in darkness, illuminated only by the occasional flash of lightning from outside. "Great," Sarah muttered, fumbling for her phone to use as a flashlight. Without the distraction of the movie, the silence between us felt louder. We sat there, the rain continuing to pour outside, and it felt like the universe was forcing us to confront what we'd been avoiding for weeks. "I've been thinking about that night," Sarah said quietly, breaking the silence. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the room like a knife. I froze, my mind racing. "Me too," I admitted, unsure of where this conversation was heading. Sarah sighed, pulling her legs up onto the couch and hugging her knees. "I don't know why it happened. It was a mistake, obviously, but part of me can't stop thinking about it." Her words hung in the air, and I felt my heart racing. I had tried to convince myself that it had been nothing more than a lapse in judgment, but deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. "I haven't told Mark," she continued, her eyes staring at the rain-covered window. "I don't know if I should." I nodded, unsure of what to say. The guilt was eating at both of us, But the connection we'd shared that night hadn't disappeared. It was still there, simmering beneath the surface, waiting to be acknowledged. As the storm raged on outside, I could feel the pull between us growing stronger again. Sarah shifted closer to me, her leg brushing against mine. I knew where this was headed, and part of me wanted to stop it, but another part of me, the part that had never really forgotten what happened 2 months ago, didn't want to resist. "We can't do this again," I said, my voice barely audible, though I wasn't sure if I was saying it to her or to myself. Sarah looked at me, her eyes conflicted, but there was something else there too, desire. "I know," she whispered, but despite her words, neither of us moved. The tension between us was palpable. The storm outside became louder, as if reflecting the chaos inside. And then, just like before, everything came to a breaking point. The pull was too strong, and the moment overtook us. We kissed again, the same spark from that night igniting between us. This time, however, there was no confusion, no shock, just the raw intensity of what we both had been holding back. As we pulled away, the reality of what we were doing crashed down on us. The storm outside showed no signs of letting up, but inside, things were even more complicated now. There was no going back this time. We had done this again and again, every time Mark left the house, and somehow he never found out. It became our dangerous secret, one that neither of us could resist, no matter how many times we swore it would be the last. But a few days later, I decided to move out. I couldn't take the guilt any longer, and I knew the only way to stop was to leave. I packed my things, walked out that door, and I never went back to that house again. I thought that chapter of my life was behind me, until one day, Mark showed up at my new place. He looked different, serious, and I knew something was coming. He sat down, looked me in the eyes, and told me things I never expected to hear, things that left me completely shocked. What did Mark say? What happened next? You'll have to wait and see in our next video. Trust me, you won't want to miss this. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, hit that subscribe button, and stay tuned for more. Things are about to get intense.